जब हम बात कर रहे हैं कि हमारे लिए सिर्फ एक ये डूम्सडे नैरेटिव नहीं है, पर एक अपॉर्चुनिटी है ताकि हम एक बेहतर दुनिया हमारे लिए और सभी के लिए क्रिएट कर सकें। अगर इस नैरेटिव को हम आगे ले जाएं और यंग लोग आजकल ग्राउंड पे क्या कर रहे हैं उस पे थोड़ा सा रिफ्लेक्ट करते हुए, वर्षा, if I can bring you in to talk about your
Yeah,
experience
sure.
of rewilding and restoration, and how do you see it in the light of Nourishing Now narrative?
Yeah. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for the platform and giving me a chance to, put my thoughts and what I do in front of a lot of people. And मेरे लिए जो क्लाइमेट चेंज का जो टॉपिक है, मुझे ये लगता है कि बहुत बड़ी बात है, लाइक ग्लोबल प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे हम बहुत सारे एक बहुत सारे लोग एक बहुत बड़े टॉपिक पे बात कर रहे हैं। लेकिन मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि जरूरी नहीं है कि हर बड़ी चीज के लिए बड़ा ही सोल्यूशन होना चाहिए या कुछ डिफिकल्टी हमें ऐसा करना पड़ेगा तब हम क्लाइमेट चेंज को रोक सकेंगे। मुझे ऐसा नहीं लगता। मुझे ऐसा लगता है जितने सिंपल स्टेप और जितना सिंपल तरीके से हम इस प्रॉब्लम को देखेंगे उतने ही इजीली हमें उसका हमें सोल्यूशन भी मिल जाएगा। जैसे कि हम ये सोचते हैं कि हम बहुत सारे लोगों के लिए एक साथ क्या कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उसकी जगह अगर हम ये इस चीज पे काम करने लग जाएं कि हम अपने लिए क्या कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि हमें सबसे पहले हमारा जो सराउंडिंग है उस पे काम करना जरूरी है कि हम अपना जो वातावरण है या जो हमारे आसपास की जो सराउंडिंग है, जो एनवायरनमेंट है, हम उस पे कैसे काम कर सकते हैं। और ये सारी चीजें हमें बहुत सोच समझ के भी एज अ यंग जनरेशन हमें ऐसा भी नहीं करना है कि किसी ने कुछ बता दिया और हमने कर लिया। हमें अपनी समझ, अपनी बुद्धि उसमें इस्तेमाल करके कि अच्छा किसी ने बोला है पेड़ लगाना है, तो पेड़ लगाने का मतलब ये नहीं कि आप कोई फैंसी सा बाहर से एग्जॉटिक सा कोई पेड़ लेके आप उत्तराखंड के पहाड़ पे लगा रहे हैं या फिर राजस्थान के किसी डेजर्ट में लगा रहे हैं, जो कि वहां पे नहीं चलेगा क्योंकि वो वहां पे सरवाइव ही नहीं करता था। जितना हम नेटिव, जितने हम अपने ट्रेडिशनल और जो आज तक काम हो रहा है या जो आज तक हमारे जो पूर्वज है, जो हमारे लोग हैं, जो लोकल्स है, ये यूज में लेते आए हैं, करते आए हैं, उसको देख के उनसे सीख के कि इतने सालों तक यहाँ पे ऐसा क्या है जो रेगिस्तान में लोग रह पा रहे हैं बिना पानी के, बिना इतना जो टेम्परेचर है यहाँ का इतना गर्म है, कैसे लोग सस्टेन कर पा रहे हैं। क्योंकि कुछ ओल्ड ट्रेडिशनल मेथड्स हैं जो लोगों ने अपने टाइम ऑफ पीरियड के साथ में सीखा है कि कैसे हम यहाँ पे जी सकते हैं, कैसे हम पानी को बचा सकते हैं, कैसे हम मारवाड़ के जंगल को, राजस्थान के जंगल को बचा सकते हैं, और कैसे हम अपनी एक लिविंग उसके सराउंडिंग में, उनके साथ में हार्मनी में हम अपनी जिंदगी उसमें गुजार सकते हैं। सो ये सारी चीजें हमें ध्यान देने की जरूरत है कि हम अपने आसपास का वातावरण कैसे ठीक कर सकते हैं और कैसे हम और सीख सकते हैं नेचर के साथ में रह के। सो ये मेरा ऑन ग्राउंड एक्सपीरियंस है कि जैसे ही मैं शहर से एक ऐसी जगह पे आई जहाँ पे पानी इजीली एक्सेसिबल नहीं है, बहुत गर्मी है, यहाँ पे कोई एसी नहीं है, कोई इजीली यहाँ नहीं आता है आपका कोई भी चीज ठीक करने के लिए। तो उस समय मुझे पता चला अरे पानी इतना इम्पोर्टेंट है। जो शहर में हमें नल खोलकर आराम से एक पानी मिल जाता है, वहां रेगिस्तान में जहाँ पे कोई सुविधा नहीं है, वहां हमें कैसे, कहाँ से आ रहा है ये पानी, किधर से आ रहा है। उस समय मुझे इस पता चला कि बारिश की कितनी अहमियत है। अगर समय पे बारिश नहीं आएगी तो गर्मी में हमारा क्या हाल हो जाएगा, जो हमने पेड़ पौधे लगाए हैं उनका क्या हाल होगा। जब हम अपने आसपास की कीमत जो होती है ना, जो हमें नेचर दे रहा है, जिस दिन हम उसकी कीमत समझ जाएंगे, शायद उस दिन से हम अपने सराउंडिंग में और उसकी भी रिस्पेक्ट करने लग जाएंगे। तो ये सारी चीजें हैं जो जब हम ऑन ग्राउंड देखते हैं तो हमें पता चलता है कि बहुत छोटी छोटी चीजों से हमें बहुत सारी समझ मिलती है, और एक हमारे अंदर ही ये सारी चीज होती है कि हमें कैसे इसको अपने लोकल एनवायरनमेंट को हमें कैसे ठीक करना चाहिए। हाँ, थैंक यू।
थैंक यू वर्षा। I'm sure we will come back to you to listen to more of your experience. But before we do that,
Sure.
I have a question for Manu. And Manu, a lot of us, young people who are trying to figure out what to do to address the issue of climate change are literally grappling between the modern day career opportunities and engagement with a sustainable way of living, sustainable food systems, and how do we enable that, right? So with your experience of being a farmer, and I love it that you say unabashedly that I'm a farmer, how do you look at the opportunities for young people today to define what does it mean to live sustainably and redefine what agriculture should be?
Sure. So thanks a lot, Aruna, again for the panel. Thanks for inviting me. And I'll just actually build my thoughts based on what both Harsh and Varsha had mentioned. So in the entire Nourishing Now aspect, as a farmer, when I see one major shift that each of us as individual youngsters can do is one shift from the entire monoculture to polyculture. While there's a farming aspect to this monoculture to polyculture, there's also a diet or a plate aspect to it. As people who've grown up, including me, we've been used to seeing, or when we think about a plate of food, there's a certain picture that comes to our mind. And that's the thing we think throughout the year. That was not how our ancestors ate. If building upon Varsha's thoughts, like our ancestors ate based on what nourishment you needed, what stage of life. Now, in those kind of thinking process, there was inherently, you couldn't exist in a monoculture system. You had that diversity. And that diversity is what actually brings or enriches the entire food system, or when it comes to agriculture. Because a lot of the work I do is right now focused on actually shifting our farmlands from an agriculture system to a polyculture system. And when we are doing this, there's a lot that we observe from nature and do. So there's the entire aspect called companion cropping. There are some crops along with if you plant the others, they act as friends to each other. There's a nutrient exchange that happens. Now, these are things that happen in nature. So when you do this, there isn't the additional need of, going in and supplementing it with more, say, even organic fertilizers or more manure, because the companion crop is doing the job it has to. Now, this story or this kind of a biomimicry can also be brought to our plate. There are certain kind of foods. Then a classic example, I think, is the entire tadka in how Indian masalas are prepared. There's a science to it. It's just that when it was handed down by generation, it just got simplified to tadka. But the way how each ingredient is added, the way of oil, how oil is used in our cooking and why oil is so important. And knowing this, when you have this level of awareness or information is where I believe people start going for coconut oil. Because right now there's an entire kind of a lobby for the entire palm oil that's coming in. And as farmers, we are directly being hit by it. And when people do not have this understanding about how like our oil cakes or our oil blends with the spices and how it enriches our cooking, that's when that dissonance factor or that resistance towards adapting to climate happens. So to sum it up, my entire takeaway is to actually see things in a spectrum, appreciate diversity. Nature does not bring anything in uniformity. I largely have mangoes in my farmland. I can never spot two mangoes that look exactly the same. I see a lot of pictures that circulate online and all of that. My two mangoes never look the same. And that's the same with us humans. There are, like they say, there could be 7 Manus, but I've never so far not spotted a Manu in my lifetime yet. And appreciating that goes a long way in making these small strides towards climate adaptation and living with the entire climate change. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Manu. Moving on to understanding this whole narrative, right? The whole dialogue around climate change that exist in the public spaces today. And Jayshree, I would just like to bring you in to understand that when we say that, instead of a doomsday narrative, we should try and create a Nourishing Now narrative for climate change. Being from the media space, what do you think that means? Is there work happening around it? How could you define Nourishing Now for yourself?
Sure.
So, Aruna, thank you so much for inviting me. I think if my stories are not being read by young people, then there's no point of writing, because the environment beat is completely, I mean, if we have to see any change in this area, then it has to be youth-led. Now, coming to your theme, I would try to be realistic. Yes, there is a doomsday narrative and things are quite bad. Simply because we are heading towards a 1.5 degree warming and then a 2 degree warming. All of us know that. Having said that, I think there is also a lot of misinterpretation of science. If you look at what the latest climate science is telling us, मैं हिंदी में भी इसको बोलूंगी एक बार और कि साइंस हमें ये नहीं बोल रहा है कि 1.5 डिग्री वार्मिंग होने वाली है और उसके बाद सब खत्म होने वाला है. इनफैक्ट जो मैसेजिंग है आईपीसीसी की तरफ से, इंटर गवर्नमेंटल पैनल ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज, आप देखेंगे कि हर बार आईपीसीसी बोल रहा है कि ऐसा होने वाला है, लेकिन आप इसको रोक सकते हो. और आप कैसे रोक सकते हो वो भी उन्होंने बोला हुआ है बहुत अच्छी तरह से. इनफैक्ट मैं आपको सब लोगों को पॉइंट करूंगी कि आईपीसीसी का जो AR6 रिपोर्ट है, असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट 6, उसमें डिमांड साइड मैनेजमेंट के बारे में बोला है. 60 चीजें हम कर सकते हैं जिससे कि 50 to 60% रिडक्शन हो सकती है एमिशंस में बाय 2050, जो कि बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट हो सकता है. और ये 60 एक्टिविटीज क्या है? ये 60 एक्टिविटीज इतनी सिंपल चीजें हैं जैसे कि फूड वेस्ट, खाना वेस्ट को क्या हम कम कर सकते हैं, क्या हम प्लांट बेस्ड डाइट की तरफ मूव कर सकते हैं, क्या हमारी फार्मिंग प्रैक्टिसेस को हम चेंज कर सकते हैं, क्या हम ट्रांसपोर्टेशन को और एफिशिएंट बना सकते हैं. ऐसा नहीं है कि हर कोई पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट ले ले, लेकिन हमारे जो कार्स भी हैं हम उसको कितनी एफिशिएंटली यूज कर सकते हैं. अगर कारपूल नहीं हो पा रही है तो इलेक्ट्रिक व्हीकल्स को हम कैसे यूज कर सकते हैं. कॉम्पैक्ट लिविंग के बारे में बोला है, और जो इंडिया के लिए मुझे लगता है बहुत रेलेवेंट है, क्योंकि वी आर इन अ वेरी क्राउडेड कंट्री. हमारे आसपास चारों तरफ लोग रहते हैं. हम क्यों बहुत दूर से ट्रैवल करके आके हमारे ऑफिस जाते हैं, या हम एक गाड़ी में एक ही आदमी बैठ के बहुत दूर से आ रहा है 40 किलोमीटर ट्रैवल करके. क्या हम हमारे शहरों को इतने कॉम्पैक्ट बना सकते हैं कि जो भी हम काम करें हम हमारे वर्क प्लेस के इर्द गिर्द ही करें, स्कूल्स भी पास में हो, ताकि हम कोई एनर्जी वेस्ट ना करें इधर उधर जाने में. अब बात रही कि क्लाइमेट चेंज को कैसे सॉल्व किया जाए. क्या हमें होप रखना चाहिए या हमें सोचना चाहिए कि सब खत्म हो गया हमारे लिए. इनफैक्ट जो आईपीसीसी का लेटेस्ट रिपोर्ट है, आप देखेंगे सिंथेसिस रिपोर्ट यही बोल रहा है कि हाँ 1.5 डिग्री वार्मिंग होगी, लेकिन वो टेम्पररी होगी. 1-2 साल के लिए 1.5 डिग्री वार्मिंग होगी. यही स्टेज है कि हम क्या कर सकते हैं ताकि हम वापस 1.5 डिग्री से धीरे धीरे स्टेबलाइज हो जाए नॉर्मल लेवल्स पे. तो आई थिंक यू आर डूइंग दिस एट द राइट टाइम. और हम चाहते हैं कि वी वांट more and more young people to engage their ideas as entrepreneurs, as thinkers, in whatever they're doing, to innovate, to use these scientific inputs and innovate. And I think what Harsh was saying is very correct, because these are also related to our well-being. We have a lot of inequality in our societies, and we know that poverty levels are extremely high. One of the things that out of the 60 activities, one interesting thing is that how the rich disproportionately add to the emissions. So we are also talking about equity, कि कहीं पे हमें equitable और justice लानी पड़ेगी. So I think these are very important inputs from the scientific community, which we are not able to interpret very well. But we are hoping that we really take these inputs forward. And for that, we clearly need a very fearless youth and a very strong democracy, so that people can actually, youngsters can actually take up the projects that they like without fearing about anything. So those would be my talking points. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jayashree. हर्ष, जयश्री ने अभी बात किया इक्विटी के बारे में, and I remember you speaking of how it is important for us to design Nourishing Now initiatives which allows for inclusion, which allows for equity, especially of population who are the most vulnerable, given the context of climate change, given the context of disaster, given what's going to hit. Now, in this context, when you look at your initiative, what are some of the learnings, lessons that you can share with us? Any key markers, principles that we must think of when we are trying to look at an initiative that is coming from a nourishing space?
Yeah. So one of the initiatives that we have is around solar electrification is in last mile communities through women. And that has been our focus for quite some time. And we have reevaluated that program to now meet support livelihood activities through solar, support educational institute in these last mile communities. Why I'm stressing on that is because we have to look at it in this way, like in India, and like I was mentioning earlier also, in India, 30% of the population stay in cities and around industrial areas, and that stat might change, but it is lesser than the population that stays in rural areas. And as Jayashree was also mentioning, there is a disproportionate impact that these places, because of the development model they have followed, have on climate change. Now, what we actually are very hopeful on is that 70% of India is bandwagon pe hai nahi. And there is a lot that we can do right from our learning from this 30% that we can implement in this 70%. So when we get to these renewable energy solutions, the push that is there, we are building an ecosystem for these 70% so that when they come into the play, they are already into the sustainable bit. They already have a sustainable lifestyle which gets propagated more, and hence the impact on climate change will keep on reducing. So that has been the core of our thinking. And that is why our program focuses on all these areas in rural places where there is no electricity, or there is cutouts and not consistent electricity. How do these first time users or people who are struggling because of this inequality can get on a sustainable way of generating electricity, which actually leads to more development and forms the bedrock of development. And we work with generally with women, because we have seen that because of climate change and because of the inequality, women are the one who get affected the most. So जो खुद ज्यादा सह रहा होगा, उसको अगर सॉल्यूशन और ये पावर मिलेगी तो वो उसको ज्यादा अच्छी तरीके से यूज करेगा. तो हमें ये सोचना है कि पहले जब डेवलपमेंट हुआ तो हमने बड़ी बड़ी मशीनें, ट्रांसफार्मर, प्रोडक्शन यूनिट लगा के बिजली पहुंचाई, बट अब ये जरूरी है कि इन गांवों में इन लोगों तक हम डेमोक्रेटाइज कैसे करें टेक्नोलॉजी, ताकि हर कोई आदमी अपना खुद की जनरेट कर सके इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, सस्टेनेबल तरीके से कर सके. और जब इन्होंने अपना डेवलपमेंट का पाथ शुरू किया है, उस दौरान ये सही डिसीजन ले जो बाकी लोगों ने, जो शहरों में हमने नहीं लिया जब से इंडिया आजाद हुआ या उससे पहले. तो ये एक इनिशिएटिव जो है जिससे काफी यूथ जुड़ते हैं गांव में. मैं देखता हूं कि वो काफी इंटरेस्टेड हैं टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में समझने में. मैं खुद इंजीनियर हूं, तो मुझे नहीं लगता सोलर जैसी टेक्नोलॉजी और इसके लिए आपको इंजीनियरिंग की जरूरत है. बहुत बेसिक टेक्नोलॉजी है, और आजकल टेक्नोलॉजी इतनी आगे चल रही है कि हम कहीं पे भी ये ट्रेनिंग कर सकते हैं और हर कोई अपनी खुद की इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जनरेट कर सकता है और मेंटेन कर सकता है. तो हमें ये सब चीजें ध्यान में रखनी है, और यही चीज हम ध्यान में रखते हुए हर जगह काम करते हैं. आई होप आई आंसर्ड योर क्वेश्चन.
You did, Ash. Thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we'll pick up a few more details when we are in the Q&A with the audience.
Yes.
Coming to you, Manu, I just wanted to understand that when we are speaking of, you talked about the relationship that we build with food and the knowledge systems that needs to be understood and also practiced, which has existed with us for long, but is lost somewhere down the line, which is causing the whole divide, the whole breakage in our relationship with nature, with food, and how we live. Now, in this context, and looking at the focus on NPM agriculture, organic agriculture, creating an agribusiness market for such kinds of products in India, where do you see us going in the near future? Do you feel that the opportunities are there? Any challenges that you would like to point to, principles that you feel are critical when one is becoming a regenerative farmer?
So the major challenge is, I believe, on the market side. In terms of agriculture, I believe as a farmer, you do 1/4. The remaining is what nature does, and you become a caretaker or a facilitator there. But with the markets, definitely there's a challenge. And I jumped into this wagon believing all is good. But when you go out to the market and when you interact, there's a lot of the entire what we call as greenwashing, I call as organic washing, that happens out in the market, where how people say, right, veganism or organic is portrayed as a very premium aspect. Now, the premiumness is because a lot of consumers are not informed of their choices, but make a choice because, okay, this has become the new thing or a new, new trend to catch upon. And in that game, it isn't the farmer or it isn't the larger ecosystem that is actually benefiting from it. It is just a few handful of players who are benefiting from it. This was something I believe maybe a lot with the COVID happening and with us actually getting the time to think we would value ourselves, our health, and what we eat. But unfortunately, that's not the reality. Like, when companies put in a margin of 100% more than what you're selling and they're selling it to consumers, yes, definitely there's a premium. How do you break this is a lot where I believe the power of youth and community comes in, because it is a fact that the existing market systems are designed in such a manner they are never favorable to the primary producer. They are designed for the intermediate to actually make money. So how do you think about designing new markets? And that's a lot where I believe these aspects of regeneration, biomimicry come into place. There's this beautiful concept, I know of an organization in India that's doing it, which is community supported agriculture. Like the point that I think Jayashree was making, you live near your office or your habitat. Can you find a group of farmers in your vicinity and actually have a social contract with them saying that we will buy fruits and vegetables from you? Can you produce year-round to us? These are kind of regenerative. When we say the entire regenerative models of business, these are, I believe, are regenerative models, where one is there's an entire earth care aspect happening, there's a people care and fair share aspect happening. And these are also pretty much the principles of permaculture. So it's a lot, I believe, the power of the youth and youth collectives to actually see how can we reimagine our food system and create these kind of innovative but easy to implement food system. It isn't a Herculean task, because a lot of regeneration organic conversations end up, okay, we are exporting our fruits to European countries. I'm like, okay, so does that mean Indians get to eat only chemicals? So it's about how as a collective we can think on these lines. And that's where I see the key factor that you mentioned, Aruna. The key factor to this entire regenerative movement is a lot in actually redesigning markets and creating markets with these three principles: people care, earth care, and fair share has the core values out there. Yeah.
Beautiful, Manu. Thank you for that. Varsha, I had a related question to you, especially when it comes to rewilding and restoration of land areas. And, many of us have been talking about carbon credits and how that can benefit communities today. when they are trying to look at restoration work or rewilding work. There are, it's becoming an upbeat thing in India as well, with mushrooming of organizations and projects which are looking at that. What are your thoughts around carbon credits and rewilding? Do share any markers that we must keep in mind.
Sure.
Doing such projects.
So a lot of organizations and a lot of people, reach out to us and asking us, अच्छा आप इतना पेड़ लगाते हैं तो आप हमें कितना कार्बन क्रेडिट दे सकते हैं, लाइक कितना कर सकते हैं. तो कार्बन क्रेडिट का जो ये खेल है वो मुझे थोड़ा कम समझ में आया. I think it's a little dicey because people are just counting the credits कि अच्छा ये पेड़ लगाने पे या कुछ भी प्लांट करने पे हमें कितना कार्बन क्रेडिट मिलेगा. But because I work in this field and I know what is the importance of planting a native tree and planting a non-native tree, because जैसे अभी राजस्थान में और जो नॉर्थ पार्ट है वो जो एक नॉन-नेटिव स्पीशी है जो मेक्सिको से यहाँ पे लाई गई थी. So it's called Prosopis juliflora, I think, जो हम इसको बावलिया बोलते हैं यहाँ मारवाड़ी में जी. तो वो यहाँ पे जब लाया गया था तो ये सोच के लाया गया था कि जो लोग नेटिव पेड़ों को काट के अपना खाना बना रहे हैं तो उससे नेटिव पेड़ों की आबादी जो है वो कम हो रही है. सो हमें कुछ ऐसा सोल्यूशन लाना चाहिए जिससे लोगों को खाना भी मिलता रहे, जो उनको वुड की रिक्वायरमेंट है वो भी मिलती रहे, और हमारे जो नेटिव पेड़ है जिनकी हम जो यहाँ पे सस्टेन कर रहे हैं इतने सालों से, उनकी क्वांटिटी भी उतनी ही रहे. लेकिन जैसे ही एलपीजी गैस आई और जैसे ही थोड़ा सा डेवलपमेंट हुआ, सो धीरे धीरे जो वो नॉन नेटिव स्पीशी है उसने पूरे एरिया पे टेक ओवर करना शुरू कर लिया, और धीरे धीरे जो हमारे नेटिव फॉरेस्ट थे, जो नेटिव पेड़ है वो अफेक्ट होने लग गए, बिकॉज जो हमारे नॉन नेटिव पेड़ है वो हमारी मिट्टी को खराब करने लगे, उस एरिया को खराब करने लगे. फिर उसके बाद में वहां पे कोई और जो इतने सालों से वहां पे सस्टेन कर रहा है वो पेड़ अपनी जगह नहीं बना पा रहा है. सो क्रेडिट से ज्यादा अगर हम इस चीज के ऊपर फोकस करें कि क्या चीज हमें लगानी चाहिए और क्या चीज हमें नहीं लगानी चाहिए. लोग नॉन नेटिव लगाने पे भी आपको कार्बन क्रेडिट दे देंगे, बट आई थिंक वो हमें लॉन्ग टर्म में बहुत ज्यादा ही नुकसान पहुंचाएंगे एज कम्पेयर टू अगर हम एक जो इतने सालों से सस्टेन किया हुआ एक इकोसिस्टम चला आ रहा है, अगर हम उस पे काम करेंगे इसके बजाय कि हम कितना कार्बन क्रेडिट किसी प्लांट को लगाने से हम ले सकते हैं. सो इट्स जस्ट लाइक अ नंबर गेम है ना, जो कि बहुत ही लाइक मुझे ये थोड़ा कम समझ में आता है. तो हाँ, दिस इज व्हाट आई थिंक अबाउट इट. आई होप जो yeah.
No, I completely feel you, and this is some of the questions that we've been asking, that when we look at policy instruments, policy instruments used without discernment, right? What it can cause at a community level is something that we should definitely be very, very conscious of. Something that can be highly empowering can also be very disempowering if it is not pushed in a certain way. So thanks for bringing that out. Jayashree, coming down to our last leg of the conversation, and I just wanted to understand that, with a lot of young people in the room today, if we have to, enable this whole narrative, this whole movement around a solution-oriented, nourishing now, life-affirming approach to climate change, which you shared so many things about, what is it that we can do? How do we support it? What are some of the key things that we must keep in mind for creating that?
So I think there are two aspects to climate change. One is adaptation and the other one is mitigation. Well, in terms of mitigation, देखिए हम अकेले करेंगे, सिर्फ इंडिया करेगा तो सॉल्व हो जाएगा, ऐसा नहीं है. सबको करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि वो बहुत बड़ा टास्क है. लेकिन एडेप्टेशन के तरीके से हम देखेंगे जो हमारे वल्नरेबल लोग हैं, जो फोर फ्रंट में है, जब भी कोई हीट वेव बहुत खतरनाक आती है तो इनको सबसे बड़ी परेशानी होती है। साइक्लोन जब आती है तब सुंदरबन के लोगों को सबसे ज्यादा परेशानी होती है। So how I think the youth can focus on how we can be made, how our communities can be more resilient. And I think there are lots of solutions in this space. It's just that we do not see much investment in these areas, unfortunately. For example, heat ke wajah se itne log, it's a silent killer. There must be lot of deaths. It's just that हमें पता ही नहीं चलता है कि कितने लोग मर गए ज़्यादा टेम्परेचर की वजह से, स्पेशली नॉर्थ वेस्ट इंडिया में. लेकिन कूल रूफ्स या फिर समथिंग एज बेसिक एज इंसुलेशन वो भी नहीं है काफी घरों में. घर ही नहीं है बहुत जगह पे, या घर है तो वो बहुत ही कॉन्क्रीट स्पेस में है. जैसे हमारे सिटीज भी बहुत ज्यादा कॉन्क्रीटाइज्ड है, वैसे ही सिमिलरली हम देख रहे हैं कि कोस्टल एरियाज में जो एम्बैंकमेंट्स हैं वो बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग नहीं है. हम मैंग्रोव्स का काम और भी ज्यादा वहां पे कर सकते हैं. जैसे वर्षा कर रही है काफी एरिड रीजन्स में जहाँ पे और एरिडिटी बढ़ने के चांसेस है. So the dry regions will get drier, the wetter regions will get wetter. So we know that science is telling us that. तो हमें साइंस को यूज करके कैसे हम अडेप्ट कर सकते हैं, इस पे काम बहुत ज्यादा हो सकता है. I think there's nothing to lose hope about. Of course it is a challenge. I mean we have to see it realistically कि हमारे पास एक बहुत बड़ा challenge आया है. But I think I feel very excited about being part of this generation and writing for this generation, for the young today, because we are really, you're talking about huge transformation, right? In our lifestyles, in the way we view society, in our interpersonal relationships with people, in how we treat animals and other forms of life. I think a lot of changes are happening. तो ये जो हिस्टोरिकल मोमेंट है इसको हमें एक्साइटमेंट के साथ ही लेनी चाहिए कि हाँ इसके बाद जो आएगा वो अच्छा ही होने वाला है, क्यों खराब होगा. बिकॉज द पावर इज विथ यू. आई मीन हाउ यू अडेप्ट टू इट. ऑफ कोर्स पॉलिटिकल विल कभी नहीं रहेगा. मुझे लगता है कि when we cover these negotiations, everything is about politics and geopolitics and strategic matters. Nobody wants to do anything. It's always to protect themselves कि मैं तो नहीं करने वाला हूँ, आपको करना है आप करो. But I think the youth thinks very differently. उनके पास ये सब रोकने के लिए कोई कुछ नहीं रोक सकता youth को. So I think we should view it from that perspective and see how, of course we have to make money also. We cannot always से कि बस हम यही करते रहेंगे और कमाना भी पड़ेगा. I think the businesses have to be in these spaces. The entrepreneurs have to be in these spaces and see how it can also lead to better life and make some money also. Because of course we have to lead our lives normally. So that's what I think. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jayashree. And the chat box is buzzing with ideas and questions. What we will do next is quickly move to some of the questions which have been asked. And I would like to open the floor with a question that is coming from young people. And Harsh, this is addressed to you. It says many young people do end up feeling helpless with this doomsday narrative, and they do want to do something about it, but often are confused about how to make the transition to climate space, which leads to even more negative feelings. Harsh, would love to know, how did you decide to shift to this space with Barefoot, and what all helped you to make this transition? There's another question which I can probably weave in with it, is that, if somebody wants to engage in a solar initiative with a few women, then what are some of the first steps that you would advise that they should do? And if there is a way to reach out to you for more nuggets of wisdom.
Yeah, sure. So I'll answer your first question first. And if someone wants to get involved in a solar initiative like this, one thing that you have to convince them that the training has to be there for the women, and the women have to be from a marginalized community, so that the power of technology is democratized. So that is one of the things which is very essential, that to learn or to go through a training, you will have to go out and carry out that training for some time, so that you can then come back and do that work for your village. Why you have to go out is also because that's what gets the accountability from communities, that yes, we are supporting this initiative. Yes, we will support our women to get trained. And yes, that will end up us getting electricity and all of those things. So if the community is agreeing on it, if they are willing to support the women and the youth, then definitely they can reach out to us and we can start. So it starts with a community meeting with everyone over there, panchayat style, call everyone, say the solution is there and what is required from them, because it has to be a collaborative effort. Let's not make it a government program where we are just dropping things. So that is one of the things. You have to have the community buy-in. One is that. The second is I saw that question that people feel. So my first on this, that people feel dejected and the doomsday story is like that. My question on that is that, you, as I think Jayashree also mentioned and Varsha and Manu also said, you don't really have to do something very large, right? Start from smaller things, as I was mentioning. Start with smaller things, and that enough is a contribution in itself, right? And if you feel, see, if you feel gloomy and dejected, then you are paralyzed, right? If you are not doing anything, then the problem is not solving on its own. So we have no other option other than doing something, either small or working with our organization or becoming an entrepreneur in this front. So I don't think the youth has that energy to sit back, not at least in India or globally. Nowhere I've seen anyone who can sit back on it, because at the end of the day, the questions that we are asking previous generations, I hope that the next generation doesn't ask us that, what did you do? I saw a lot of your rebellious things when you all were young, but you did not do much for us also. So that has to be thought about, that what are we fighting for and what should the future generation look back to us. And at least we can say that, boss, every day I save 5 liters of water. My lifespan is this much, so which goes into gallons of water I have saved, which can actually give more water to a village outskirts of Rajasthan somewhere, because you saved it here just by not keeping your tap open or using whatever. So those are the things we have to think about. Abhi nahi kiya to kya kiya? Depress hoke kya karenge? Kuch to karna hai na. So that is one of the things that I would feel people to keep thinking, because we have young energy, we have a lot of years there. So let's do something instead of sitting. So that is one thing, that how I motivate myself. The second is how I got into the sector is because I had always wanted to do something in the sector, but I never knew what. So in college, I used to do something. But then when I went into the fellowship, and I had very passionate young people around who were very sure on what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it, and very driven about it. I was not one of those. What kept me in the community was having conversations with people around. So for 6, 7, 8 months, I just had conversations with people who were there. What were the challenges they were facing? What are the new things they are thinking about? And basically, how did they survive for this long? Like, I am coming there and I feel that, okay, water is not there. It's that heated and all of these things. All these challenges are there. But they have been there for 500, 600 years and still surviving and thriving. So the knowledge that I got from there actually made me think that these are beautiful things which we never got exposure to. And there's so much of knowledge that I could learn with and actually work with them to develop something. They have the knowledge. And I come from a city with the language is one thing. And how can we work together to make it a better place? And for me, any suggestion to young people would be that take out some time, spend some time in a village, and talk to people around. That will actually give you a lot of foresight and insight on how much you can actually contribute and how much of knowledge and learning is there, which you might waste. No, I should say waste, but yeah, in cities you might not get, because you get busy with your work and Friday, Saturday, Sunday is for relaxing.
Thanks, Harsh. There are a lot of questions which are flowing into the chat, which is about how do we engage and motivate young people to act? And from your experience, and this is an open question to the panelists, from your experiences of inspiring action, building communities of young people who you can motivate and work with, what are some of the things that have worked with you? How do you think it will be easier for us to work with young people either in the urban or the rural context to get up and act and do something about it?
So on that, one thing that has worked, at least with and after that, Manu, sorry, I just had this because I really feel strongly about this. One thing that I feel is that the narrative of this sector and working on climate has to change. It's not about, like I mentioned, it's not about sacrifice, chappal, jhola, and all of that, right? It's a sector where we are solving existential questions. It's a sector which requires, or the climate change is a topic which will actually shape up the world afterwards. So we have to keep, I haven't met anyone who has worked on climate change or in the villages doing that who is dejected and wants to leave. I have seen such job satisfaction here that in my 5 years of corporate, I didn't see, and neither in any government engagements that I talk to government employees, they are that motivated. So my suggestion to people would be that, as I said, that one narrative has to change. It's not about sacrifice. It's about your drive. You are passionate, so you will find purpose and you will love working here, irrespective of how the geography is, how the temperature is, all of that. I have seen actually doesn't matter. And that's how we get a lot of volunteers. And what I suggest to them is come, spend a week, spend 2 weeks and see if it is that bad. So that would be my suggestion on it.
Yeah, so my take on this motivation aspect, because I fairly seen that switch from me while working in the space and then while moving to as a farmer. The motivation has to be internal. You can't place the motivation on an external factor. And because this journey that we are in isn't a 1 year or a 6 months or a 2-year period. So you can't put in those, what do you say, short-term motivations. It doesn't work. You need a clear purpose to why you're doing it. And I think that's where Harsh was also saying, for me to come down, do farming, to be in farming, there's a reason. And every day the journey doesn't get easy. To be like, it isn't a rosy picture. I believe it's like being a farmer, and people ask me, how are you comfortable with ambiguity? I'm like, go ask a farmer. He's just aced that skill. Every day he's like used to waking up and getting slapped like twice of more than that. But what at the end is you have to have that clarity. Why are you in this journey? Why are you doing it? And that is what leads to the actions, because failures are going to be in this journey, especially a lot of us. Like, I'm a first generation farmer. I don't come from a family of farmers. So I am learning a lot of things on the go. I'm learning a lot from community, a lot through technology. Like ChatGPT is my best friend right now in the village, because more than any agriculture university, it helps me a lot in terms of preparing my crop calendar and then contextualizing it. So in all of this, you need to have that sense that, I remember back at ISDM also, we had this conversation about the need to center yourself. And it happens through people through different ways. Meditation worked for me. For some people, it's something else. It could just be a simple thing as going and petting your cow or your dog. That could also be an act of centering. But that's very important in this journey. It isn't a journey you can do with Excels and PPT.
Hi. So I actually agree with Manu that it comes from internal, like it's based on self-realization, which was like what happened to me when I was living in the city, and someone actually asked me like, and I was doing my engineering and, looking for jobs and doing a lot of placement drives and everything. So someone asked me, do you really want to do it? And that was the first time I asked myself, like, do I really want to do it? Do I really want to go to a office where I work 9 to 5, come back to जहाँ पे मैं रहूंगी, एंड बहुत सारी चीजें मेरे दिमाग में आई, एंड देन दैट वाज द टाइम व्हेन आई रियलाइज्ड नो, आई डोंट थिंक सो दैट एक्चुअली गिव्स मी हैप्पीनेस, है ना, ऑल द टाइम लैपटॉप के सामने बैठ के कुछ करना. एंड देन व्हेन आई शिफ्टेड टू दिस स्पेस, आई started connecting with the birds in my surrounding. हमारी एक छोटी सी बिल्ली है जो आ गई कहीं से, बहुत सारे डॉग्स आ गए, मतलब इतना अच्छा लगता है ना कि मैं बहुत ज्यादा ह्यूमन इंटरेक्शन से ज्यादा मेरा इंटरेक्शन मेरे सराउंडिंग में मेरे पेड़ पौधों के साथ होता है, बिल्ली के साथ होता है, चिड़ियाओं के साथ होता है. वो हमारे साथ ब्रेकफास्ट करते हैं, लंच करते हैं, और डिनर तो नहीं करते हैं एक्चुअली पहले सो जाते हैं, बट लाइक it's like a family, and I connect more with, you know, my surrounding here rather than जब मैं सिटी में रह रही थी और ये सब. सो आई थिंक इट्स अ सेल्फ रियलाइजेशन. जब आपको ये रियलाइज हो जाता है कि आपको एक्चुअल में क्या चाहिए, तब शायद आप और ज्यादा मोटिवेटेड रहते हो किसी चीज को करने के लिए. So this is what I think, that everything comes from you rather than an external force most of the time. Yeah.
Beautifully spoken. I would like to take one more question before we have to go back to our main room, and that is around the whole question of, is it too little too late? You know, and which is what people keep asking. If I save 5 liters of water, is it going to be enough? You know, if I do this, is it going to be enough? And that has raised many questions amongst young people even today. And then we have the whole policy space, Jayashree, that you were talking about, right? Where we have our politicians, our leaders who are taking strategic level decisions on what we should do as a country, as a nation, and what should be some of our moving forward points of action. Where do you see young people's action between these two? Right? How can we make a...
Yeah, I think one of the things that we missed out in this conversation, and I forgot to say it, is that the fact that politicians are dragging feet on doing something is also because we do not hold them accountable. The youth, like I said, that we need a very fearless democracy. We need young people to actually say, we want this. You have to do this because this is linked to electoral results, election results. So and climate change never figures in election or politics or demands to have it as an election issue and all of that. But I think somewhere now the time has come to also make it an important issue, because after all it is a matter of well-being for millions of people, millions of youth and their children and the generations coming later. So how do we actually hold people accountable is something I think that the youth really need to find a way to do it. I think that all these issues are also because there is not enough demand for the solutions. We think that, oh, it's all right. I mean, there's a lot of politics. Let's not get into that. It's fine. Let them, solve it. But I think that's one of the reasons is why time is running out and we are now at a point of crisis. So going forward, all this talk about net zero emissions, we'll go net zero by 2050. Some people are saying we'll go net zero by 2070. But are you actually putting in place policies that will take us to net zero, or is it that you're depending on technologies later which are not even proven, like carbon capture and storage? We don't know whether that can be broad-based, whether that can be a very effective technology or not. If it does, then it's good, but at the moment we know for sure that it is not something that we can rely on. So are the youth asking, how are you going to do net zero and what is our role in it? So those are I think will be the very important questions going forward, starting this year, in fact, because now heading to COP28, which is the UN climate conference, वहाँ पे हम देखेंगे कि बहुत सारा politics होने वाला है. तेल और गैस जो फॉसिल फ्यूल वाले डिपेंडेंट कंट्रीज है, वो बोलेंगे कि नहीं, हमें ये कंटिन्यू करना है. कंटिन्यू अगर हम करें तो फिर हम कैसे नेट जीरो करेंगे, वो भी किसी को पूछना पड़ेगा. So there is a lot of clampdown, but I think the youth will have to, sort of take measures to how to articulate themselves as to what they want to see in this country and globally. That's what I think.
Wonderful. Rajesh, just a quick check on time. Do we have time for one more question, or we have to get back to the... you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Sorry, we can take one more question. There are so many questions, beautiful questions actually, and I'm just responding to them saying let's connect separately and take this forward. But we can pick up one question for sure.
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up the last one that I can see on the chat, which is around climate anxiety. And especially because it's very close to the group that we're talking about, young people. And so the question says, climate anxiety and mental health issues put people at risk of becoming unfit to study or work, negatively impacting their quality of life and sense of agency, and incurring significant cost to society. What do you think about inclusion of climate anxiety in climate education as a country? And open to all panelists who would anyone who would like to pick this up.
Yeah, I think climate anxiety is very real. It is something that the many people go through, especially when we see images of say large forest areas under fire, or koalas leaving the forest or getting injured with burn injuries, animals, extinction rates going up. So these are all things that are triggers, and I think people who are sensitive to, or people who have a deep love for nature, often go through such anxiety. I think it's valid to recognize that this is something that the young are experiencing. When you start validating it, I think people feel better that, okay, I am not